All right, guys, in today's video, what we've got here is a Walbro LMG, if we zoom in here, LMG 175, maybe 175 suffix A. Carburetor. This came off of an 2-horsepower outboard boat motor made by the West Bend Corporation in 1963. So I'm going to take you through the rebuild that we're doing today on this particular series. This 175. These numbers are just, differences for the different engine OEMs that Walbro would sell carburetors to. So I believe what we do today, I'll cover any of these LMG series carburetors and probably be very applicable to the LME as well. All right, the first thing we're going to do is there's this shield here. Normally it would be painted and have a decal about rich and lean settings for this lever. So we're going to pull these two slotted screws off and take this shield off. It's kind of dented up, so we'll repair that. It's one of the things we do on this rebuild as well. This right here is the fuel shutoff valve, so we're going to see if we can get this off without removing that. Might not be able to, though. Let's see. Looks like there's a little spacer I didn't notice that's on either side. Nope, to get this one off, we are going to have to pull this guy. So we'll come back to him in a minute because I wasn't expecting to pull that, so I don't think I have a tool to get this T off. But we'll have to take this T, at least turn it to get this off. Let's turn our attention to the bowl down here. This main fitting here is a 7/16, I believe. Yep. So we'll pull this guy off. All right, that's not a good sign with all that corrosion on there if we zoom in. So we'll see what it looks like when we get in there. This should allow us to... That was holding on this guy here. It should allow this bowl to come loose, I think. Pretty sure this other fastener is just some sort of a drain, but let's see. That one I measured out as a 5/16. That guy doesn't seem to be coming loose. Oh, because it's like somebody stuck like a Phillips screw on the inside. If we zoom in on here, I don't think that's supposed to be a Phillips screw in there. We'll check. All right, here's the float. Is the original Walbro. I think we can get this little rod out with a pick here. Probably should have brought some small pliers. Try it on this side so I can get a better grip on it. We'll take a break here in a second and I'll go grab a pair of pliers. All right. We had this little gasket sitting here. It went on the side of the bowl that touched against this piece. And then we should have our seat sitting in here. Don't know why that guy is on there so tight. Should just be falling out. There he goes. We should get another one of these in the rebuild kit. Showing you where that is all at. So let's go ahead and I'm going to go grab a wrench so we can get this fuel fitting off so that we can remove this shield. All right, let's see if we can just get a crescent wrench in here and get this. I don't want to take it off. We just want to get it off enough to do what we're doing right now. So that'll remove this screw and this spacer so that we have this shield removed. Now I don't want to remove this guy yet because we want to see if we're able to get a rebuild kit that includes this, because if I recall correctly on these get drilled during assembly, so if you remove this you'll never be able to get it aligned back up with the hole again. So the service ones are okay, but the original ones you need to leave alone. We'll take this idle screw out next. It's also got a spring on it. Zooming in on this one here, just like I see again, it's just a consistent theme with some corrosion to the body of this carburetor. Hopefully it'll clean up. The shaft doesn't have any play in it, which is good, and it moves. The spring is very weak, so hopefully we can locate a replacement spring for this. Or maybe it's just a case of it needing to, get worked and freed up. This guy here is working okay. I mean, again, there's no play, so it doesn't need a bush or anything. It is kind of stiff, but I think this is another one that hopefully will just clean up. So we won't try to remove these shafts. I think the only other disassembly we could do is, I guess we could, if we wanted to, we could go ahead and remove this valve here. We don't need to, but I do see some debris inside where this fuel line would have went. So it probably is something that's going to have to be cleaned out. So we'll just go ahead and take this off. See what we got going on inside. Don't see any debris inside. Trying to get it where you guys can see. We'll have to get a flashlight maybe a little while later. Now at this point, I think this is the level of disassembly that I want to do. Now there is this adjusting screw up on top here, but I don't think we need to bother with that. So the next step would come in cleaning. So if we look down inside here, I'm going to try to hold this where the light is. So we can see there's a lot of corrosion inside here of debris. This came from the motor itself. It's not the carburetor, I don't think. We got to get all that debris cleaned out of there. And then we're going to want to try and clean out the idle passage as well. But the next step is going to be to see if we can find a rebuild kit for this. Let's see if we can get this gasket off of here. It looks like a gasket. It is super hard on there. I'm positive that is a gasket. This black material. But it is, if it is, it's like really wedged in there. There it goes. Okay, so yes, this is a gasket. I'm sorry. This was a gasket. It is from almost 60 years. Just disintegrated. So let's just go ahead and peel all that out of there as well. So we need to find a rebuild kit for this that will include this little seal for the bowl. Hopefully these seals we see here, 1, 2, and 3. Hopefully a replacement for this idle adjuster. Hopefully a new seat. The float's okay. Let's go ahead and remove this guy too. See what condition he's in. I think this is the high side. Okay, so that looks okay. This one here, it's got a lot of corrosion on it, but it looks like it's just corrosion that's like attached to it because it's brass. So this is just going to have to be cleaned up. What this is more indicative of is that this bore has got crap in it that we're going to have to get cleaned out. All right, so let's go see if we can locate a rebuild kit. I'll finish getting this remaining gasket material out of here, and then we'll come back and start the cleaning process. All right, I cleaned some of this up. We still have a couple more things to do here. I want to get this gasket that attaches the carburetor to the engine off. I want to try and get it off as intact as I can in case whatever kits we end up coming up with don't have this same style or size. So usually I like to use a razor blade for this. This is just to try and get enough of it intact so if we have to fabricate our own that we're able to do that. So this technique usually works out pretty good for that purpose. Just make sure you're very careful when you're doing this. If it slipped, it could cause serious injury. There we go. All right, so we got that off intact. Now, like I said, I'm going to leave these throttle and choke plates in position for now because I don't think we need, it's easy enough to take them out. If you want to take them out, get a flathead screwdriver that's the correct width of the small slotted screw that's in there. All right, like that guy right there, and on this side there are two. But I think we'll be fine to leave them alone. I might end up taking that out if after cleaning we still have this poor response with the throttle in order to replace this spring if we can track one down. So at this point we got enough to try and do the initial cleaning. Now inside this brass jet piece, if we zoom in, there's no rubber gasket on this model. Some of these LMGs will have a rubber gasket in there. This one does not. But also, this should have had a spring. So this piece would, this piece sits here, and there should have been a spring between this piece and this piece. And the other thing is that on the bowl, this little thing with this Phillips screw is not correct. This is not factory. Somebody modified this at some point. Original owner said he didn't do it, so maybe somebody that serviced it at some time did one of these kind of improvisations instead of the correct fix. So the correct fix, we're going to get the correct drain assembly that's supposed to be on this bowl. And toss these. These are not original parts, but I suspect when somebody went in and did that, they lost the spring. We've got the original parts manual that came with the engine, which is great for this parts explosion. And so what we can see is what parts we're missing. So 14 are these 3 red gaskets that we had, 1, 2, and 3. There's the spring that I was referring to if we zoom in a little bit on the diagram here. So we've got the needle sitting here, but there's supposed to be a little spring there that we don't have. We've got everything else that I can see in the picture, so we're not missing anything other than down here. So when we look at the main adjustment needle valve, we've got that. We've got the spring, but there's also supposed to be an O-ring and a washer. And we look at what we have. We just have the valve and the spring. Now I did look inside this housing, thinking maybe it was wedged up in there, but it's not inside there. As far as I can tell, it's not inside there, unless, at the very end, there's like a black ring, you can see, if you zoom in. But it has no roughness to it. It's perfectly smooth. So, if it was a washer or something, I would expect to be able to grab it with a pick, but I can't. So I think maybe at one point that's where it was and it left like a stain or something. We'll kind of keep looking in here to see if we can see those parts, but I think we need those 3 pieces. I think we need the spring for the needle seat. I think we need the washer and the O-ring that's supposed to go on this piece here. And we need the correct fuel drain valve assembly. Now when we look at that in the picture here, they just show it as this kind of part 16. But what it actually consists of is like a T-shaped brass piece, a little rubber gasket that sits inside the fuel bowl, a spring, and then this clasp retainer that goes between the spring and that T-piece. So I'll see if I can track all these parts down. In the meantime, we're going to get going on the cleaning. So we're going to start with the cleaning process. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take like a nylon brush and we're just going to get all this external crud off of the outside pieces, and then I'll bring you back. I'm not going to bore you guys with that piece. I'll bring you back when we get ready to do the first chemical cleaning. All right, we got everything brushed off. I'm going to put it in an ultrasonic cleaner. Let me show you what I'm going to be using for that. This chemical here is Simple Green Pro HD. There's several of these kind of purple products. This is the one that's safe for metals. The chemicals that are usually in these compounds typically attack aluminum and zinc type materials. The only thing you got to be careful of is it can't get hotter than 100 degrees. And there's the kind of recommended ratios. I'm using a 1:4 ratio just from past experience. And so what we've got here is this particular ultrasonic cleaner I'm using has a built-in heater. So we're not going to be able to run it constantly, but I'm trying to get this heated up to a point where we can then turn off the heater. This button here turns the heater on and off, and we can start loading stuff in here at 70-ish or so. So I'm going to put some of the parts to keep them from getting kind of mixed up. This little guy here is where I'm going to store the idle valve and its spring. Just put them in a little container like this. Get this guy to close again. And then I put all of the nozzle and main valve, the needle seat, the spring, the swivel for that in here. Probably won't be able to get everything to fit on this first pass. I can just put these screws in here that hold the shield that we took off. Our fuel valve that we're going to leave in the open position, all the way open. And we want to get all the air out of it as much as possible. And then we're going to watch this fill line when we put the actual carb body in here, because we want to keep this no higher than where it says max here. So with the displacement, we may have to take some of this out. But again, similar kind of deal. We just want to get all the air bubbles out as best we can. This guy here is kind of an awkward shape. We're not going to be able to get him fully submerged, but we're okay. We don't need to take anything out. So we're going to run this 1:4 for this max settings. There's several different sequences. We're going to run it for 480, And we're going to run through ultrasonic sequences like this 6 times for something like this. Rotating the pump body in different, the carb body in different directions each time we do one of these, just to shake loose all this debris and material. Now we could put the float in here, but it's going to float. But maybe we can just get something off here on the very side, get some of that material to shake off. I'm not going to put this shield in here. This is aluminum. We are going to put this in the vise though and get rid of this bend that occurred at some point. But we're just going to leave this natural. And then the gaskets we're just going to hold on to until we get a repair kit. So we're going to keep these 3 gaskets that you see kind of off here on the side. Let this run. I'll bring you back when we get done, and I'll show you the next step of the cleaning. So again, I'm going to run it 6 times through this mixture, and then what we're going to do is we're going to clean it with mineral spirits. All right, guys, 6th cycle, almost wrapping up here. While this was going, we went ahead and put this shield piece in the vise, so we got the bend out of it. We might have to do a little bit more fiddling with it to get it to sit properly on the carburetor again. But we're done with this step. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put these guys over here into some distilled water to clean them off. Won't bore you guys with that. I'll do that off camera here, but I just want to get all this cleaner off, and then we're going to do some compressed air to get the rest of this material off. So all this came out pretty good now. There's our fuel valve. Mounting screw. I think we put a spacer over here somewhere. Same thing over here. And there's our carburetor. So we can see that really cleaned up these top pieces of metal. This stuff attacked whatever paint was left on there though. Yeah, so our throttle is working really good now. So we're not going to have to take it apart any further. We're not going to have to replace this spring. So that's great. And this is working very smooth now. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll get everything rinsed out over here. We use compressed air to get anything in here that might be some, debris trapped in the cavities. I'm going to get some piano wire, and we're going to go through all these, and then we'll bring you back and do the next step. All right, after blow drying everything off here, I'm actually going to change what I told you guys. So, taking a look at the bowl, we got it nice and clean now. We can actually, if we zoom in here, we can actually see the Walbro stamping here, USA. So all that grime's off of there. We can see that the little jury rig that somebody did on the drain hasn't damaged it. That kind of raised surface is supposed to be there, and that flat depressed surface on the inside is supposed to be there. But if you zoom in here, what we do see is some corrosion, and the cleaning material is not going to remove that. There's some right there by the drain, and then there's some right here in the corner. And then the other place that I see corrosion is on this spring for the idle screw. That's just kind of cosmetic, but we do want to try to get rid of that where we can. The main valve spring has a little bit. It cleaned up nicely on our throttle return spring. So the grease or whatever was on there, maybe the paint, because this was all spray painted originally from the factory after it was mounted. Save that. But it definitely cleaned up the throttle response, right? That's perfect, right? That's exactly what it's supposed to do. So looking down the throat here, I think what I'm going to do, well, you can see the brass cleaned up on this choke plate, so definitely okay with that. If we look down the bore here, the throttle plate, there's a little bit of staining still on it. This side here, if we zoomed in, still nothing I want to take it apart any further. Remember, we're just trying to do a a basic rebuild. We're not trying to restore this cosmetically. We're just trying to get it functional. And then if we take a look down here where the fuel valve attached, so you guys can see down there. And let's see if I can get the right angle with the camera here. It's difficult for the camera to see, but it's all cleared up down there as well. And then where the nozzle went, you can see it's all cleared up in there. And the valve seat area is all cleared up as well. So we got everything out there. So I think what I'm going to do is this for next steps. We're going to take some evaporust, and we're going to use this chemical to do what we can with these two springs and this fuel bowl. See if we can get rid of that surface corrosion. And then what I'm going to do with these plates is I'm going to use some CRC carburetor cleaner. We're going to push that through under pressure. See if we can get these last few bits of deposits that are on there. We'll run the wires through any cavities. We'll run it through here as well, and I think we'll be fine. Save a little bit of money. Won't have to soak it in mineral spirits. I think that'll do, and we'll be ready to reassemble. If we take a look at the nozzle, we zoom in here, you can see this is perforated with several small holes. 1, 2, 3, and 4 right there, as well as this large one here. So this whole area here has to be very clean. We compressed aired this out. We used some wire to make sure there's nothing in any of these holes. The high-speed tip is fine. It's not dented or damaged. We might take a little bit of a brass polish up around here, see if we can get rid of some of this tarnish. And similarly, we might see if we can get some of the tarnish off of this barb. But again, inside here, looks really good. All the way down to the shutoff valve. Right there. If we zoom in, you guys should be able to see down the throat. And then there's still a little bit of, looks like almost like copper oxide. Like there's a bit of copper that has become exposed on this end of the brass. Obviously, copper is in brass, right? So some of this is just maybe the type of alloy that was used back then. So we get some cleaner in there so we can get rid of that tarnish as well. And we'll be ready to reassemble. All right, with all this cleaning done, we actually located our needle spring. It's actually a design I wasn't recognizing. It's kind of sitting inside here. So with everything cleaned up, these pieces were able to separate. So we don't have that missing. Something else we want to make sure of with everything clean now is that this guy slides in and out easily and doesn't get stuck. You remember when we were disassembling it, it was stuck in there from all the varnish. So we are probably going to have to reuse this. When I go over the rebuild kit, I'll show you why for this particular one. The other thing we thought we were missing was we thought that there was supposed to be a sleeve and a gasket for this high speed valve. And it turns out it's actually here. I don't know if you guys can see this, but if we zoom in, this brass bushing has an insert in it. And this actually could come out, right? I'm not going to remove it though, and if we can't find a replacement, we'll have to leave it in there, but that piece is also not missing. So it's just pressed in to this housing that sits in this way, and so that you have the 90-degree deal with this, right, that we took off. That's a set of parts that are unique to this LMG 175. I don't think any other LMG uses this type of 90-degree setup. If you dove one that you have, I'd appreciate hearing it in the comments. All right, last thing is cleaning the idle circuit. For this one, I want to take you under a magnifying glass. All right, so the idle circuit. It's very important that we get this cleaned out. So that little hole right there, right? That little hole right there ends up running through the body and coming out right next to where the idle screw is going to go in. We have to see that hole. We're going to have to look down past the throttle plate. So if we open the throttle plate up, me get situated here, and I'll get a light in here for you guys. If we zoom in, there's a teeny tiny hole right next to the large hole. That's the idle circuit. It comes out there. And then the other one that we got to make sure is cleaned out is there's a vent hole right here at the top. So we want to make sure that we flush those out with carb cleaner. And if you don't get anything through, you're going to want to use a wire and keep repeating until you do. So let me show you that. All right, so you can take the carb cleaner and position it right on that opening that I showed you by the choke. You're going to watch that you see it come through on the idle side. Don't, spray a lot. Just part down, and you should see it coming out where the idle screw is. So now we know this passage from here all the way over through here is clean. And then the other piece I was telling you about was just to make sure that this small hole here, this is just a vent. And you can see that's coming out the bottom. Right, so as long as you see that the chemical is getting through those two channels, it's clean. All right, and again, while we are under the magnifying glass here, if we open up this throttle plate, if you end up removing it, you notice that underneath those two slotted panhead screws are two star-style locking washers. Make sure you have both of those. And similarly, if we look at the choke plate, you can see there's the same piece. So if you end up separating all these, make sure you have all these parts when you put it back together. All right, we got one correction to what I told you guys before. It was because it was confusing with the service manual. If we zoom in just a little bit, this 175A LMG is unique in that the design of the nozzle is removable. And the piece that they were talking about that you should not remove is a screw-in nozzle that this model doesn't have. This needle seat for the float is fine to remove. So that's one thing we should have removed in the cleaning process. I don't know how tight that guy's going to be on there, but we definitely want to pull him off. There we go. Because that'll let us get just a little bit more cleaning, and there is another gasket under this piece. Could not find a slightly wider screwdriver, so I'm going to make do with this guy. All right, so you can see there's a gasket on here. Pull that off, add it to our gasket collection. We'll drop that in some carb cleaner, and then we'll clean just this little bit of oily residue that we weren't able to get because we didn't have that removed. So that'll complete the cleaning, and then I'll show you in the service manual what we missed. All right, so now let me show you rebuilding this. So if you recall, one of the things we had to replace that was not correct was somebody stuck a Phillips screw in here for the drain hole. We do have that part. Could not find the OEM Walbro one. So if we go back to our service information and we remember that part 16 was what we're missing, and we came over here, this 154502, this was superseded to something else, and they're both unobtainium. But what I found was some of the engine manufacturers like Tecumseh and Clinton would repackage these Walbro parts under their own labeling. And so we found that under Tecumseh number here. A 27136A is the Walbro drain. And if we pull this out here, we've got 4 pieces. So we've got a plunger, a spring, and a retainer. So this we can all keep. These are all hard parts. Those will work fine for repairing that. And then there's also a seal. It'd be nicer to find a newer seal. This packaging looks like it's probably from the early to mid 1970s. So this is kind of old. This is NOS, new old stock. We'll keep it up here for now. Hopefully we'll find something better. Now, when you take a look at the rebuild kits, so the rebuild kit, again, going back to the service information here, the rebuild kit would have been, let's see, either 24 or 23. So 23 is the gasket kit, 92501. That I was able to find, and the newer number that it was only recently discontinued is G1LM. The repair kit, 300-569, this is long, long gone. The most recent number would have been a K1LMENG or just LMEG. I did not use the repair kit because when we take a look at what's in it, and I'll put a picture right up here in the upper right, we find that the replacement that it includes over the gasket kit, if we zoom in, it includes a new idle speed screw, and this one is cone-shaped. And the one in the K1 LMEG kit is not. It's cone-shaped, not, I'm saying cylindrical shaped. So, right, this is a cone-shaped speed screw for the idle on this LMG 175A, and then here's the high speed, and it's cylindrical. And what you find in the rebuild kits is they have something that's small like this for the idle. We can't use that. The second thing in the rebuild kit would have included is we've got the needle seat and spring and shaft, and it includes the new shaft in the rebuild kit, but it's the wrong type of seat and spring for this particular one with this particular float design. So unfortunately, we couldn't use that either. I'll show you an LMG 159 up here, which has a brass float with that other spring design. So we're electing to reuse these parts, and rather than purchase a rebuild kit that just gives us those things over the gaskets, we're just going to use a gasket kit. So there is the 92501, new old stock. This is, I would say, late 1960s, early 1970s packaging. So definitely old stuff, but for these fiber type gaskets, it really doesn't matter. They never really go bad. It's just the rubber type stuff that you have to worry about going bad. So definitely new old stock. We also, from the same supplier, got a newer one, which is the G1LM kit. And what we'll do is we'll take the best of both of these, right? So even if we got the correct part number, as you can see here, we're only getting 2 of these fiber sealing washers when we need 3 for this particular model. And this is just, the shrink wrap plastic just sticking to everything. We are getting a new drain seal, and then this would be the gasket for the seat for the float needle. This would be our engine mounting gasket. And then this would be our bowl gasket. All right. Now what's in the newer kit? So this is a kit with packaging from the 1990s. So it's going to have several engine gaskets. Obviously that one doesn't work for us, so this one actually matches our old one just fine. It's got another engine gasket. It's got another engine gasket, and the K1 LMEG rebuild kit will not have all of these different engine gaskets. I believe it only includes this one. So we can see, well, that one's not right for ours. This one could work in a pinch. This one also could work. This one is too big. This one's the wrong shape. So we could have used one of these two, but we're fine to use this one or the old one. And then they give you 2 different size bowl seals. We would have used this larger one. They give you 2 of the fiber sealing washers, and the reason I got 2 kits is we need 3 anyway. Then they give you the seal for the seat, housing. And the drain valve, if I can get it out of here. Come on. This is actually something else. I'll tell you what that is in a minute. All right. And there's for the drain. This guy here on the other LMGs would have gone on the high-speed needle. And we can't, I don't think we can use that on ours because, as I showed you earlier, we got some kind of a brass bushing on ours. We don't have this kind of a setup. I was thinking maybe this would fit on this brass bushing, but I doubt it. All right, so what are we going to use? I'm going to take the old gasket for the engine because that's fine and that matches perfectly, and we can discard this one now. I'm going to take 2 of these 3 that we need, and I'm going to take 1 of these to give us our 3rd one. So right here's our 3 new gaskets. Got a little bit of plastic on here that I just want to peel off. I'll do that later. I'm going to take the more recent gasket for the seat. So now we've discarded that. And I'm going to take the most recent calendar, year for the seal on the drain. So now we've got everything that we need there. And then it looks like this vintage one and this newer one from the 90s they look like they might be the same size. Just double checking. Yeah. So we'll just take the newer one for that as well rather than the old ancient one. And so let's start rebuilding this. So the way this piece here would have assembled is you would have put this seal onto this shaft without tearing it. Let me zoom in here, you can see better what I'm doing. All right. And then we would have worked this into the bowl on the inside. And by the way, we were able to clean up pretty good on this corrosion. The rest of it are evapor rust converted. All right, so that sits right there. And then we got the spring. And then we've got to get this retainer to hold the spring down and then slide over this little piston thing here. Make sure you have a good grip on this spring at all times. Whoops, let me go pick that piece up. All right, where were we? All right, so yes, we want to make sure we got a good grip on this spring while we work this guy on. All right, there he goes. So the way this deal works is that's holding the spring, and then if you push it in, it lets the fuel run out. You let go of it, the spring pulls the seal back over the bowl, and it's supposed to hold it in. These are notorious for leaking once they get any kind of age on them, and it's definitely something you do not want to use ethanol-based fuel on, non-ethanol fuel, otherwise it'll probably attack that little seal. Okay, so we've got that piece. Next thing we'll do is we'll take the valve seat, put that replacement gasket back on there, and we'll screw this back into the body. I still owe showing you guys some service information. We'll do that in just a moment. Okay, we'll snug that up. There is a torque value on that. We'll go over that later. We'll take our needle valve and our spring, and we'll drop them back inside here. We'll take our float, set him here. We'll take our shaft, run it through. All right, now this shaft piece has a specification on it that has to be met in terms of how far it's going to sit down. So let's go over to the service manual. Pause for a second. All right, so service information. We've been looking at the parts explosion and the different parts that are involved here. First, let me cover that confusion over the piece that gets removed. You notice on this that the only thing that screws into the body is part 11, which is the needle valve seat. The nozzle holds the bowl and then gets inserted into the body. If we take a look at the OEM information for the boat manufacturer, the motor manufacturer, we can see same picture, same exact picture. Well, not exactly exact, but close enough. But over here, they give you some information that says, do not remove the carburetor main nozzle unless absolutely necessary for cleaning. If removed, the original main nozzle must be renewed using a service part. So the only thing that screwed in here was part 11, and that's what caused me to get confused for a moment until I looked at a different engine manufacturer. This case, Clinton, also used the LMG carburetor, and now we see that this has two things that it screw in, and the nozzle actually screws in. And they say the same thing, right? They say that caution, do not adjust or remove the main nozzle unless absolutely necessary. Discard the nozzle if removed. If the main nozzle was removed, replace with a service main nozzle. Do not restore the old nozzle. The reason is this thing is cross-drilled, and it's after it's screwed in. So if you take it out, there's no way you'll ever get it lined up again. That's the piece that shouldn't be removed. All right, so there's that. Next thing we're going to do is going to talk about adjusting the float. So if we go back to this piece of information, it says here the float height adjustment can be checked after the bowl is removed. The float height is measured with the carburetor body inverted. That means upside down. Should be 5/32 of an inch clearance between the gasket surface and the nearest edge of the float when measured at 180 degrees across. Then they tell you that the float height, when properly set, when you turn it the other way around, when it drops, it should be no more than 3/16 of an inch. And we see that's consistent with what we see on the Clinton documentation. Float setting, invert the carbon float, should be a clearance of 5/32 between the outer rim of the casting and the nearest part of the float at the opposite side of the hinge. The height adjustment can be made by adjusting the tab on the float valve. If a screw is provided, then turn that for the height adjustment. Reversing the casting to the normal position, it should not drop more than 3/16 of an inch. So if we make this easy and convert this, it's 5/32 of an inch when it's inverted. And then if we flip it around, we're going to add 6/32 to that. So that gives us 11/32. So the adjustments they're talking about, let me show you that. So I'm going to take this back off for a second. So let's just go remove this little pin. If you zoom in here, you see this little ridge right there, that little ridge right there? That's what this back tab rests on. That's the drop adjustment. On the float, in this particular plastic style float, this screw moves this plunger up and down. So to set the resting height, if you turn this down, it's going to come up. If you loosen it, it's going to go down. It's that simple. So if we take a look at this one that I've already adjusted off camera just to save some time, put this screw back in. We're going to take a little machinist gauge here in 30 seconds. And so I'm going to hold this up against the wall. So if we come up along the wall here so we can see easier, zoom in on the gauge, 5/32 in this direction. And now if I flip it in this direction and take our gauge, try to not block your view here, 11/32. So that's what we want. 5/32 in this position, 3/16 of a drop maximum, which ends up being 11/32 in this position. So we've got this adjusted now. So to continue with our reassembly, now we can put this seal for the bowl into its groove. If we can get him to cooperate here. Come on. Just got to get him to stretch a little bit. Going to have more than one tool here, I think. Gonna hold it here, pull it here. Actually, you know what? I can tell this is going to be a pisser. Let's go ahead and pull this back off for a second without bending anything. And by the way, I guess I should have showed you, when adjusting this tang in the back, I find the easiest way is to grab it with a pair of pliers like this and just very, very, very slow movements, because a little bit goes a long way. All right, so with that off and out of the way, let's see if we can get 4 or 5 fingers going on this. Get it seated. There we go. All right. Now we'll put this back in. And the bowl is going to help hold this little guy so he doesn't come off. Oh, this thing is a pisser. Slipped back out of the groove when we put the float on. All right, I don't know why this seal won't stay put. Keeps popping up on one corner each time. So we are going to make it stay with some Loctite gasket adhesive, at least until we can get the bowl on. This is just going to get one side tacky so it quits popping up on us. Should not be a big production to get this guy to sit in here. It fits in the groove just fine, but each time you get it in there, it wanted to pop out, just like that right there. But I think with that gasket sealer, we finally got it to sit in there. All right, great. No more screwing around with that. All right, let's put this float back in for the last time. Try not to hit the edge of this seal with our fingers and cause it to pop out. Now we can mount this, and it's going to go in this orientation. All right, so we need to do a couple of things. We're going to need to take one of these. I'm going to take this. And then we're going to take this. I'm going to put this, there's a little kind of prong sticking out that fits in this hole right here on this particular setup. Just like that. Then we're going to put this other seal on the inside. Make sure it's flush. Make sure that bowl seal didn't pop out again. And then this whole shebang just going to get tightened down. I'm trying to have this line up right perpendicular to the choke. And now I'm trying to figure out why is it not threading in. Guessing that this is not seated enough. I have to get that started first. There we got it. And then we're going to clock this. Make sure that's dead on. And then we're going to snug it up. Don't want to go too tight because it's soft metal. All right. Next, we'll take our idle screw and we'll get him threaded back into here. And on this guy, we're going to snug him down but not go too tight. Just until it seats with 2 fingers. Just 2 fingers. Right there. Okay. And now, like I said, we really don't have any way to replace that seal, so we're just going to leave it. Put the spring back on the main adjuster. Thread him back in. Same thing on here. We'll just do it until it feels 2 finger snug. All right, feels tight. Now let's take this cover or shield, spacer on the side. This one started by hand. Same thing on the other side. Spacer. And then we got to push it over to where it goes. Get it started by hand. Get it kind of clocked out where it's supposed to be. Tighten this down. Tighten this down. Make sure this is working okay. And what I'm also going to do on here, I'm going to put a drop of 3-in-1 oil right where the bushings are for these 2 shafts. Grab it right down here in the bottom too. I actually had done the one on the bottom of the choke already off camera just to make sure everything's moving as well as it can. Now, what's supposed to be printed on this particular one, it says rich and then lean. I'll put a little picture up here on the right of what this is supposed to look like when the paint wasn't worn off. The last thing we've got is this fuel shut-off piece here. Thread this in. And I don't know what I did with that wrench. I have to go get a wrench to tighten this guy up. Tighten him up off camera. But there is our completely reassembled unit, right? And now we can take this gasket here, mount it back on the engine, and go through the tuning process. So let me show you a couple more things in the service manual, but we're basically done. So the service manual after the float adjustment, this walked through, in this Clinton manual, this walked through what we did. I'm not going to read it to you. I'll just leave it here to you just to kind of see we already did all of this. The adjustment needle. So when you install the idle needle should be seated very lightly, turning clockwise, and then back off counterclockwise 1 1/4 turns as a preliminary setting. So that's what we will do when we put it on in the engine. And then somewhere down here it should say the same thing. Yeah, seat the power adjusting needle, that's the high needle, very lightly turning clockwise and then back off 1 1/4 turns as a preliminary setting. So that's, for both of these. And on the one we had, I think it says the same thing. Might not. They don't say anything about it on here. What they do give you is that the nozzle can be 30 to 40 inch-pounds, and that's not for this one, but this is for, I know it's really confusing, guys, but it's for the bottom-mounted one. Can be 30 to 40 inch-pounds when you tighten that nut right there. When you tighten the valve seat, 40 to 50 inch-pounds, and the retaining nut, 50 to 60 inch-pounds. So I hope those numbers help you. Since they were so conflicting, I elected not to use them. And then the last thing I'll show you is, and I'll put a link to this version down in the video description. This is another 1968 Walbro technical release. We can see here that idle adjustment here, it's a little bit different. It talks about 1 1/2 instead of 1 1/4. When they do the float, they talk about 4 30-seconds instead of 5 30-seconds. And they don't even talk about the 3/16 drop version. That's why I didn't use this one, because this one was different than the other two. And then they talk about the high side needle also being 1 1/2 instead of 1 1/4. So this stuff is kind of all over the place, but these LMGs, as you can see, had a lot of customization to them. Here's yet another parts explosion. I think this is the LMG 117. So again, very different. What you'll find is in some rebuild kits, the needle valve has a seat and a retainer that sits inside of the housing. And we didn't have that on ours, and we didn't see that on the one from Clinton either. So there's just a lot of kind of tweaks and variations on these. This rest of this looks similar, except they're showing on this one that there could be 3 different possible adjusting nuts, right? You can see that one's kind of got like a taller hex on it. This one's shallower. This one is got a place for the needle to go through it. This one is solid. It doesn't even have a main adjusting needle. In this case, it's got 2 needles up here, right? So I'm trying to do a video that covers as much of this LMG series as I can, but you'd actually have to have about 10 different versions of these to cover all the variations. So again, that's it, guys. I hope you found this useful. I've tried to show you all these different variations. Here's another variation of the LMG that has 2 needles up on top and a 3rd needle on the bottom. So this one has 3, kind of adjustments. And this one has 2 possible different throttle shafts as well. And here's another variation too on 2 different choke shafts. So a lot of this stuff got customized for different engine manufacturers. And so you're going to see a lot of variation there. Anyway, I hope you guys found this useful. If you got questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. We're going to go ahead and get this mounted back on the engine. I'll show a video of that when I get to it. This one is rather unique in having this 90-degree adjustment on here, but I think we've got it back as close to factory original as we can, and I'm pretty sure it's going to operate just fine. I mean, this thing is like perfect now, and even the choke is just perfect. It's just moving very, very easily. So I think that's all this thing needed, was a good cleaning and a rebuild. Questions or comments, again, in the video, in the description down below. If you got anything I can help you with, I'll try to answer it down there. If this saved you some time, money, or even learned something, go ahead and pay it forward. Hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. And as always, thanks for watching.